they all have their different audience. They all have their different themes and twists and what those shows are about, what makes them unique. But what I find is like what people love most about those shows are the hosts of those shows. No matter what they're talking about, they've connected with that host. And that happens in a sense in the true crime space with Up and Vanish, To Live and Die in LA. But these are true stories, and you have to be very mindful of the sensitivities around these cases. You can't put yourself out front. Even if you naturally are out front because you're the one doing the investigation, it's your voice, there's a victim here, and that victim has to be put front. So you have to walk a very fine line when it comes to how much do I, talk about this and make this a not a spectacle, but utilize social media for the greater good of the podcast, because it can be so successful just within the podcast space, and we try to use social media as an additional place for information, for some visuals that you may not, because there is no visual in podcasting. I mean, we none of ours are done this way where we're in front of a camera, so it's just audio. So we want to have our covers and things like that. We'll pull like very unique quotes that are from the episode, or damning quotes or important stat, and we'll put those on social media. And we try to have a well-designed page and invest money in graphics and all that stuff, but it's less about the interaction with listeners. Now we'll do other things where we let our listeners interact with each other. So we had a message board for Up and Vanish, which was insane. I mean, the case, it was part of, it's part of the case. Our message board for the season 1 of Up and Vanish is where a lot of the finger pointing was going on, where everyone was anonymously giving tips, where one of the guys who was a co-conspirator who's now doing 20 plus years prison was actually on the message board defending himself, trolling, trying to point fingers to other people. And it's actually where he illegally leaked the confession of his co-conspirator in a way to clear himself. And the GBI investigated and tied that back to him. So our message board was discussed in the Georgia Supreme Court, and our podcast was discussed in Georgia Supreme Court hearings over this case. So we try to provide a space for other people to talk about these shows versus us really being the main communicator of the message. Let the people get in there, because it's the people who are really helping to solve these cases. That's what's unique about our shows, is that it's also difficult, is that we're producing them in season. It's not like a documentary where we're producing it, polishing up, making it perfect, putting it out. We're producing episode to episode, because when the case breaks, everything changes. And now we're chasing leads in real time. We're putting out a podcast. We're putting out episodes in real time. We're taking tips in real time. And that tip that you leave in our tip line on Thursday could be in the podcast episode on Monday. So that type of feverish, I guess it's it's the way, it's this sort of rabid fan base. They're not really fans, though. They're really like these justice warriors that want to see this case solved, and they want it so bad that they're out there trying to solve it online and making calls.
It's interesting because I was involved in a situation 2-3 years ago that resulted in an individual getting some time from inappropriate behavior as a teacher with a student. And I was running the online social media. And what I found, and it's interesting as you talk about this, but what I found in my situation is because we did it on a public Facebook group, is that I had as many haters as we had supporters coming out. Basically, people trying to undermine our work of what we're trying to get out and get the information and get the public involved and asking for other victims to come forward and stuff. And so we actually found that the forum almost ended up being we were getting the finger pointed at ourselves as much as the perpetrator. And it really was, for me, kind of challenging in that standpoint. So it's very fascinating when you say you work on the brand, you work on the graphics, you put this site together, then all of a sudden you've got the community coming in, and a common cause trying to help with the case. That's what I wanted. And I felt we failed in that effort. Now we ultimately got a couple of people fired, resigned. Someone convicted. Um, it, I don't know. I don't think I had the same satisfaction in the end, but it sounds to me like you guys have had the ability to build this. Now, do you get some of that? Do you get some of the people pointing the finger back at you guys saying, "Oh, you're just spreading bad information," or how do you deal with
Oh,
that?
yeah, we can talk for an hour just about that part. So there's everything that you're saying. We've experienced that. We've experienced that on basically every podcast. These, as many people as there are that are in support of you, there are not as many people. It could be half the people, but they're twice as loud. They're
Right.
3 times.
Right.
So, I mean, if you're going to be a host for a true crime podcast and it's going to be at all at all, then prepare for a storm of hate, finger pointing, everything that you stand for will be called into question, justly or unjustly.
Did you guys get libel insurance, or what did you guys get insurance to kind of even protect the company and yourselves from these stories?
Yeah, for sure. We have a healthy policy because you never know. Like these, even if you're not directly pointing the finger at someone, the audience is going to come to that conclusion, because
Right.
you're just laying out facts.
Yeah.
And we'll put our opinions in there and say like how we feel about people, stuff like that. But it's less really about that. It's more about the listeners who are like, you're doing this wrong. You can't do it this way. And you think about it. Payne is a documentary filmmaker and director. He's not a journalist. He's not an investigator. He's not an attorney. And if you look at who are the people who are doing the most impactful, the biggest true crime podcasts, they're journalists. They're these social justice warriors who are attorneys or investigators. They're former detectives, police officers. So we got it from the podcast industry itself as well, because it's like, wait a minute, you can't do that. Like the way you're doing that is wrong. And we were like, look, we're not podcasting. We're just some guys from the music industry and the film world. And this was our interpretation of a podcast. We don't know a lawyer who can go do this. We don't know journalists who can go do this. Payne just said, well, I can go do it, so let me go do it. But people don't understand that the reason why it worked, not that it doesn't work in other situations. Clearly, Serial was amazing and it worked, and that's from a journalistic perspective. Pretty down the middle. Our podcasts aren't as down the middle because there are it's just individuals who are telling this story. But the approach to the investigation, like Payne is literally, he's knocking on doors, he's crawling under houses where someone said there may be a body. You know what I mean? Like we're actually in the investigation, but he's doing it the way any person out there would do it if they were to make this podcast. And that's why I related to the audience so well. Now, I've related as well to people who had rules on how you could make a true crime podcast, but we came into this with no rules. So,
and in podcasting, there are no rules.
So were you ever worried about your safety at all, especially on the murder podcast?
Oh yeah, a couple times. Less me, mostly Payne, because he's the voice of this thing. But there's a couple times from authorities and from these no name, no face having suspects out there, because at a certain time before there are arrests, someone did this. You don't know if they've left the country. You don't know if they've left the state. You don't know if they're still living in that town. And Payne has had situations where he was leaving Ocilla, Georgia, headed back to Atlanta, and a GBI officer walks up behind him at a gas station and knows who he is by face, knows the car he drives, and starts asking him questions, not in a harassing way, but just like, we see you and we know what you're doing here, because the GBI didn't look great in this case that we were looking into. There were some definite issues.
Oh man,
they dropped the ball. So we weren't their best friends. But even scarier than that is, so the guy who was on our discussion board who was defending himself, he ends up getting arrested, and he has a deal in place to testify against his co-conspirator. And so he gets arrested and he's out on bond the same day. And we end up uncovering more information, and blowing up his deal. And this guy is now, he has no deal. He's probably going to prison. They're no longer cooperating witness. So we've already destroyed his plan of early release or no prison time. While out on bond, he commits 2 more crimes, rape 2 women, and is now on the run. And we're thinking this is going to end one of 2 ways. This guy is either going to go out shooting and not because he doesn't want to go to prison, or he's going to try to settle the score and drive a couple hours to Atlanta, find Tenderfoot TV, find Payne, and go out with a bang that way. So that was like a 5-day manhunt wherever they were looking for this guy. And we didn't know what to think. We're like, okay, we need to take precautions. This guy you don't know what's going to happen. Luckily, they found him. You know, he got arrested again. He's now facing those 2 charges, and he was already convicted on the other. So he won't be out for 20 plus. So that's out of the way. But yeah, that was probably the scariest time where it wasn't a direct threat. And there have been some direct threats, but nothing, threats of violence, but not threats of like, I'm going to kill you from an anonymous person. But when you have someone who actually killed someone and disposed of their body and then rapes 2 women, and and the person he probably wants to take this out on the most is the podcaster who exposed him. Yeah, those were pretty scary.
You really struck a chord with me here, because I was living in Hawaii at the time, and I was joking about coming home to see family, and I was telling my friends, I said, I'm going to need security, and maybe I need to wear a bulletproof vest while I'm home. I was kind of serious because I had gotten some threats from some of the stuff that we had exposed. And I think, too, you alluded to it a little bit, but, we saw some authorities we thought were... they weren't working in our favor. Let's just put it that way. We felt that there was some protection going on of individuals because of their status in the community. And it, maybe it plays in some of the stuff that's going on right now today, is that oftentimes we don't think about the politics in towns and how people act and where, I'm in small town America, and, everybody knows everybody. You don't move back to a small town and have secrets, because everybody knows your secrets because it's a small town. So I think you're running. It feels to me, at least, that you're running into some of those dynamics and have seen that. So does it piss you off?
Oh yeah. I mean, to see what's actually happening in these cases, and I think I have a healthy respect for law enforcement. I think it's an incredibly difficult job. In high school, I was mentored by police officers in San Jose, California, where I grew up. I think it's a tough job, and the conditions in this country don't make it easy for that job to be done well, and the resources, I think, are not there for the community and for the police. That being said, there are bad officers. There are lazy officers. Not even just bad. Not crooked. These are people who just don't do their job well, and that's what we've seen in so many of these cases. Then we see people that are in that same precinct, that same county, that same office, who are exceptional, and we talk about them much less than we talk about the ones who are bad apples, because the consequences are so much higher when you solve a crime you're supposed to solve.
Right.
When you hinder a prosecution, when you are the reason why a crime doesn't get solved, now you're not doing the job that you were supposed to do. So that's why we don't give as much praise as we do criticism. But it's just amazing when you see, this 10-year-old cold case that was up in Vantage season 1 could have been solved 2 weeks after. There, where this missing teacher, 30-year-old teacher, high school teacher, she was, went missing. She was murdered. Her body was dumped on a pecan orchard, and the police were called to that orchard, and they were called off by a sheriff while on their way to go search. And had they not been called off, had they been able to search, maybe they would have searched and found where her body was disposed of. And it just was, it wasn't a conspiracy. It was just, ties that are too close to the community, where it's like, hey man, if I know the sheriff and I hear someone is coming out to my property, I'm going to call the sheriff because, we hunt together, we watch ball games together, and the sheriff, and that, something like that, or I have a prominent business in this town,
right,
and I don't want the police on my property, so I'm going to call in a favor. Hey guys, there's nothing over there, pull back, nothing, don't worry about it. That's exactly what happened.
Or interdepartment rivalries, everything.
Right. Yeah. Oh, right. Yeah. It's there's so much. There's so much, and I think we're so into, as a country, everyone is looking for the conspiracy, and they're looking for it to go like, man, how high does it go up? Sometimes it's not a conspiracy; it's just incompetence. It's just a favor for a buddy.
Yep.
And the supervisor doesn't necessarily know. The chief doesn't necessarily know, and it makes it much less of what you would consider a conspiracy. It doesn't make it any less wrong. It still makes it where that person didn't get justice, or that person was abused, or whatever it was, that officer didn't hold up his end of the bargain, for the community. And that's what we're seeing, and a lot in so many of these cases. There hasn't been a case. I mean, I guess it doesn't make a good podcast if that doesn't exist, because our podcast have that element, that in there, and from as small as one officer, or one officer and one agent that just didn't do their job well, to a district attorney who completely overlooked it because they thought there might have been a crime that they didn't want to deal with, so they just labeled it, unresolved or undetermined or suicide to get it off their desk. We've seen it all.
I tell you, the thing that pisses me off the most is FOIA requests, because I did a bunch of FOIA requests, and I kept getting stymied. And then when they would finally say, okay, we're going to approve your FOIA request, that's $3,000, please. And, it's just this, you're supposed to be able to send a request in for information. They're supposed to do their due diligence within due time. You sure you got to pay for the processing, but man, FOIAs, to me, there's so much information in FOIAs. We uncovered so much from that. That was almost 90% of us saying, hey, here, looky here. This is where the problem is from before. Yeah, it's the system works for you, but you got to grease the wheel, got to continue to grease, because they're not going to make it easy for you to do anything.
Yeah, and what do you do if you don't have someone like you on their side? Someone like a journalist or a podcaster who is willing to take it on, a private investigator who's going to work pro bono. If you don't have the money to pay for those requests, to go investigate, to hire the right investigator. I mean, on the LAPD website, at least it was on there, they might have taken it down now, but we were doing To Live and Die in LA. LAPD website basically says, hey, if you're an adult missing, there's not much we can do for you. We suggest that you hire a private investigator. If you can't afford a private investigator, we suggest that you go to the Salvation Army, and they can provide some sort of resources to help you look. So, because they're viewing it as a missing adult, there's no proof of a crime. So they'll probably just show up. And oftentimes when they don't show up, it's too late. So it's, and that's not just the fault of like police not wanting to do the work, but there's other crime that's taking them away from it. They're not enough detectives, that are to look into those kind of things. That we have, a lot of police usually on the ground to handle things, which isn't necessarily a good thing. I don't know that we need police, doing as much as they're doing on the ground. I think we need more investigators, detectives, people who can work within the community, not just enforce the law, but actually investigate crime. So yeah, it's just, there's an imbalance right now that doesn't make it easy for them to do their job, or for us to get services that we need and require from state.
Rob, I interrupted you earlier. What were you going to ask?
No, I was just going to ask, has there been any situations where the police have made an arrest, but you guys have continued to dig to try and either you guys didn't think that was the right guy that they caught, or blame for the crime, and you guys kept digging, and did that cause a problem?
Yes, two instances. I mean, one is pretty well known, and the Atlanta child murders. Wayne Williams is in prison. these are serial killings that happened in Atlanta from 78 to 80, and I believe he was convicted in 81 or arrested in 81. There is a lot of evidence to support that Wayne Williams is guilty. He's serving life in prison for 2 murders, but he's serving life for 2 adult murders. There were 29 victims. Most of them were young black men or boys, actually, from 10 years old to, I believe, their late 20s. But majority of teenagers, and 2 of them were actually young girls. And Wayne Williams is tied forensically to several of these murders. He was convicted of only the two adults, but they brought in 12 of the murders in court to prove a pattern. So he is considered a serial killer, and he's attributed to at least 12 of these murders, and they convicted for 2. But they closed all the cases except for 6, knowing that they didn't even have enough evidence on a lot of those cases to even present them as pattern evidence. So there's so many reasons of why this was done. One of them being that you can't have 29, and these are the only ones that were reported and categorized the Atlanta child murders. 29 young black boys, young men missing and murdered, and only lock up someone who for 12 to 15 of those, because to the community, we're still on alert. There's still a killer out there. And so what they had to do was close majority of the cases, say we got the guy off the street, now back to business as usual. And that's what happened in Atlanta. And this happened because they needed the city they didn't need race riots here in the city. Atlanta would not be Atlanta if it weren't for the sacrifice that those families made back in those days of the Atlanta child murders. Those victims, they're the ones who should be thanked. Those families are the ones who sent Atlanta to be what it is today, because had those murders not been swept under, have they said, look, there are killers still out there, and have there been race riots, have they really done a deeper investigation into the Klan and their possible involvement, the city would have tore itself apart. The city was on the verge of not being the metropolis of the South. We were really battling with Charlotte, North Carolina, and some other cities in the South to really be that hub of business South. Would the Olympics have come to Atlanta in '96? Would we have all this the music industry and film industry here right now if Atlanta had proven itself to be no different than the Deep South, not the New South? And I don't think it would have. And I think the sacrifice was made by those victims. And so as we continue to look into that case, we're like, look, there are probably other people out there. They may be dead by now, but we look deeper into that, and it's not a conversation that authorities want to have, the GBI really wants to. The FBI, on the other hand, they actually agreed. The profiler said Wayne Williams is responsible for probably 12 to 15, but it never made it all the way up the ladder. And the ladder went all the way up to Vice President George Bush. He was involved getting briefings on these murders on a weekly basis from the FBI, and everyone understood that this had to end. And that's what happened.
So apparently so to your theory, then there's another murderer out there. There's another serial killer.
Or several. And it's not just about race. I believe that there was some Klan involvement in some of those murders. I don't believe in all. I don't believe Wayne Williams was patsy, that he was set up. I believe he is guilty of at least a dozen of those murders. But I believe he may have co-conspirators. I believe that there were other young black men, because Wayne Williams is a early 20s black guy who did not at all who anyone thought we were looking for, except for the profile, who actually profiled him to a T. But a largely black city with all black victims in the South, everyone's mind is going to go towards racially motivated, right?
Yeah.
So when a black man was arrested, that also didn't sit well in the community, because they're like, hey, you're just trying to cover this up, sweep it under the rug. Turns out, at least in my opinion, and to those jurors, that he was guilty, but the injustice didn't stop there. The injustice continued when you didn't go out and try to solve these other 6 to 12 murders that we believe were not committed by Wayne Williams. And that's something that Atlanta still not really recovered from. There's still a deep wound, there. So that's one example of kind of going beyond. And it's not just us who've done. A lot of people give credit to so many people who believe the same theory and have taken it beyond that. A more recent example of that, To Live and Die in L.A., the perpetrator of that crime, missing young woman who was found murdered, and this all happens literally in real time. It's not in a real time, which is a real time investigation. It's real time in the sense that the investigation is real time. The events that are unfolding are happening in parallel with the police investigation. We're in front of the police investigation a lot. We're in front of the news, so we're reporting on it, and then you hear it on the news a couple days later. All that. So when you get immersed into this story, you hear like actual thing that happened, then you hear the news get it wrong. So you get this really interesting fly on the wall perspective of an investigation. The guy who was responsible, we found out who he was. Police found out who he was. There was a manhunt. They end up finding this guy. He ends up killing himself, and you think that justice is done. The LAPD says, case closed, we got our guy, no other suspect. We keep investigating both sides of this story, from the victim side and from the perpetrator side. We get embedded with both of their families, and we get access to so much of his data, which is so important in this day and age. You can get cell phone data from a victim or from the criminal. You can map out all their steps. So we used Google data to trace everything, all his steps, the day that she went missing, and that definitively proved that he did it. More so than just what police thought. We definitively proved when, where, how he did it. Discovered the receipt, shovel that he bought, the glove, everything that he bought at this hardware store in preparation for this murder. So it was premeditated, obviously.
Wow.
But what we discovered in his cell phone record was that one of the people, and I'm not going to spoil this for everybody, one of the people that was helping us try to get to the bottom of this was lying to us this entire time when he said that he had never talked to the suspect, that he didn't have communication, that he didn't know who the victim, that he never met the victim, never talked to the victim. We found out that he had talked several times. They were communicating this entire time, and that not only did he go to this person's house, but he actually disposed of the body not less than a mile away from this person's house, and went to their house first. So all the evidence points to this other person being a co-conspirator, not either in the murder or in the disposal of the body. And that person is not in jail right now. But there's a ton of evidence. So we're still working with LAPD. We're working with the sheriff department in the county where this guy lives, and this person needs to be off the street. Person is not a good person, and we have a lot of evidence that at the very least he's lying to the authorities. He lied to us, and we have someone who says the person confessed to me that he was involved.
Donald, if I had hair, I'd be standing up on the back of my neck right now, because here's the thing I'm really coming to kind of grips with here, and I'm sorry I keep relating back to my personal experience, but there's thousands of these stories. You guys are only just touching a few.
Right.
There's any and I want to ask a personal question of your team. Does this take a toll mentally? Because this is hard work. This is like deep in the guts in people's lives, their tragedy. I just cannot imagine not being personally affected by this, because I know from what I little did in the case that we were involved with, it took a toll. So how's your team handle that?
Yeah, we talked about this. We talked about it on some panels as well before. It definitely can take a toll. I think you have to. It takes a toll because you have to be so invested in the case, and the people that you're dealing with are the actual victims' families. You're dealing with friends, and you get to know someone that's no longer here, and you have this sense of obligation. And everyone, it's not for everyone. And even if you think it's for you, you could fall apart during it and just say, it's too deep, it's too hard. And the thing about it is like it never leaves you. I'm still in contact with people from Up and Vanished season 1, friends of the victim. Exchange texts every now and then, not just about the case, just these people. Mark Smerling, who did the Jinx, he told Payne one time, like it doesn't stop on the podcast. Basically, what he said, like these people are in your life forever because you've now created this bond with them, so you can't really. It's a project now; it's over and I'm gone to the next.
Right.
You're always involved. Anytime something comes up with Atlanta child murders, we get calls, we get requests for interviews. When Mayor Bottoms from Atlanta mayor, she reopened or they're re-examining evidence in the Atlanta child murders. So naturally we're going to get calls and to be on CNN, HLN, and tell us, give us our opinion on what's going on. So you're never disconnected from it from the moment you start it, and it can have a toll on you. I think we haven't been impacted to where it has really taken a toll emotionally to where we had to stop investigating. We do have to detox from it as much as possible and do something different and not go straight from seeing like being granted access to thousands of documents from the Atlanta PD, looking at original crime scene photos.
Oh.
That's not easy. You know what I mean? These are kids.
Yeah.
That takes a toll. That it's not what you think you're signing up for when you want to do this. You want to cover some big case. You want to try to shed some light on it and let people even know about it, that this happened, that these victims exist, that about Ted Bundy and about Jeffrey Dahmer and about Son of Sam. You don't know about Wayne Williams. Why is racism actually ends up impacting murder victims as well, and how those people are, how we remember them in those cases. So you want to do it for the right reasons, and once you're in it, you realize how hard it can actually be. So we've been holding up pretty well, and trying to spend our time doing other things and not diving from one major case to this other one. But it's fulfilling at the same time when you have a victim. We're able to do good as well, right? Like, so Tara Grinstead, we have a scholarship fund in her name that we've done the last 3 years. We postponed it this year, but we're doing it again next year, just with COVID and everything. But she was a beauty pageant winner, and the day that she went missing, she was actually the day of the pageant. She had won that several years before, but now she was helping other young girls prepare for the pageant. So we sponsored that pageant for about 5 years and gave $1,000 to the winner every year, and then 2 scholarships for one male, one female student at the high school that she taught at. So we were able to create some good out of it for the community. We started we did a fund for the daughter of the victim of season 2 of Up and Vanished, who obviously was left without one of her parents. So just anything that we can do that it helps take the thing off of it a little bit when that you can actually do some good with these podcasts as well.
One thing that we found was I have to be careful here. We had information that there was other victims in our situation. And those victims, which we were pretty sure who they were, wanted nothing to do with the discussion. They had that was in the past. They're married, maybe they've got kids or whatever their life situation is. They don't want to be drugged back in. So sometimes at least what we found was we could have put someone away a lot longer, but there was resistance by previous victims to come out and say, hey, I was a victim. And they didn't want, because they've moved on from that. And for me, that was the hardest part. I wanted this guy to spend the rest of his days in jail, and he's not. But what can you do? Because the victim has said, I'm done, and I'm done. So it's a dead end. But I think there's a lot of that in America.
Oh, for sure, especially in cases of sexual assault. I understand where you're coming from 100%. My sister, who actually works for Tenderfoot as well, she is a forensic interviewer and counselor for sexual assault victims. And she sees it firsthand every single week and knows how how hard that is for those victims to come forward to tell their story, either right after it happened and definitely years later when you're like, okay, I have some sort of closure. I've moved on.
Right.
Clearly, I'm carrying it inside somewhere, and that's not healthy. But that is what feels more comfortable for me now than to rip off that scab and experience this whole thing again. So you have to be sensitive to both sides. At the same time, you want to get this predator off the streets that will likely do this again if he ever sees the light of day again. So yeah, it's definitely tough. You end up going. There's this thing like that we always say when we're doing these podcasts. If you're setting out to find the truth, that's different than setting out to get justice. And the truth is getting the whole story. Justice is putting someone away. And if truth is actually what you're after, it's going to be uncomfortable. It's going to be uncomfortable for the community. It's going to be uncomfortable for the victim's family, the victim's friends, because in order to investigate, especially when a woman goes missing, the first thing they're going to do, or in a sexual assault, even more so, they want to rip apart the woman's life. They want to, and see like, well, what were you wearing? Where are you at? How many boyfriends did you have at the time? All this stuff. And when you're investigating, all that stuff comes to you, and you have to figure out what I want to put in this podcast. If I leave this out, then how do I bring up this person who actually may be a suspect because he was dating her? And then it becomes, well, why is this about how many guys that she was dating? And you don't really get a chance to put it into perspective of like, she dated these 3 guys, but it was over a 9 or a 3-year period even. And it becomes very difficult. And there are times when the family doesn't want you to do this and you stop doing it because after you stop, you've stopped the progress of truth or justice, whichever you're out for. And the family wants justice, but there's a cost. And truth usually comes out as you're seeking justice.
That's right.
Or even when you seek justice, do you push further than justice to get the whole truth? Because justice doesn't always uncover everything. It could be other co-conspirators. It could be, people who knew and didn't come forward that, could have solved this thing 10 years ago. There's so many things you have to deal with along the way that you really have to figure out, like, what's worth it and how do I delicately handle the situation.
So I'm sure there's a few people listening to this show that are thinking about this might be a genre they want to get into. And what is your advice?
It's me and Payne look at this differently. He always says like, don't do it but he's not saying it don't do it because no one should do it. He's saying it. There's so much that you don't understand and you won't understand until you try it. And if you think it's going to be a walk in the park, you think it's going to be all the good and none of the bad, you've seen all the good that come from these true crime podcasts. You've seen a fraction. You've seen a small percentage of the bad that comes from it. Part of what we talked about, the emotional toll, part of what we talked about, the backlash from the community, from podcast listeners, from family, from law enforcement. You've seen a fraction of that, nowhere near the whole picture. So if you're judging this on like, man, this seems cool, like I can go do this and make a difference, it's not cool at a certain point. Once you're in the thick of it, you're in danger, or maybe people dislike you. You have to have tough skin. And I think that you should do your research, you should consider all the bad before you even consider any of the good. And you should prepare yourself on how you'll deal with the bad, prepare your family, how would you deal with this on social media? If this becomes a dangerous situation, are you exposing yourself, your family, your friends? Think about all that stuff. And then when you decide, yes, I'm going to do this, hopefully you're willing to take that on. And I say hopefully because there are so many, you mentioned it earlier, there are so many cases like this out there. Police don't have the time. The family can't afford a private investigator. The media is not writing about it. And sometimes it takes a person like you to go and dive into a case and bring attention to it and then document that on a podcast, put it out, it gets exposure. Now, next thing you know, you're on local news, local media, talking about this case that may have never gotten the attention that it deserved. And if you start making some progress in the investigation, Now maybe you're on national TV talking about this, or your podcast is successful enough to where people are talking about it international. So the good can far outweigh the bad, but you have to go into it considering everything that could go, not necessarily wrong, but could be a reality that you're not necessarily prepared for.
I think in my situation, it's some loss of some lifetime family friends. It was do I need to watch my 6 more than I used to? That type of thing. And even today, it's kind of like one of those, like, is my car going to blow up? You just don't, you just don't know, and I joke, but it's the truth, but, yeah, a lot of that really resonates. And that, Rob, you and I talked about what I did before a little bit, but we really never went into too much detail. And, but I was never set out to make a podcast about it. I was just working to get a guy to get some time for what he did, and along with it was a small group, 4 or 5 other people that really brought this guy to justice ultimately. But, oh man, it is, yeah, a lot of like tingling in the back of my head here. So Rob, actually we can get on some other topics here, some other questions you have for Donald.
Yeah, I wanted to just talk a little bit about the audience for these podcasts, right? Donald, I mean, have you guys done some deep kind of like surveys or whatever to find out who's actually listening to these true crimes podcasts, and also kind of secondary to that question is has what's happening in the world right now had an impact on the listening to these topics in these podcasts?
Yeah, I think so.
On the audience side.
The audience. So the first question, we do surveys for most of our shows. At least we have for the past, 2-3 years. So we get about 2,000 people that respond to these surveys, maybe more sometimes, and it gives us a good indication of who's actually listening. And we know, how many of are male, female, single, married, income, other podcasts that they're listening to, and like our listenership is 80 to 90% female.
Wow.
And that's a high number. And I think that's across the board for true crime, which is really interesting because it's largely women that are the victim in these true crime shows. So you would think that maybe they're turned off by that, but actually I think everyone is naturally intrigued by a mystery. And they want to know what happened, but also if women are the victims, like I think women are concerned listeners as well, right? Like, what did this person do right, do wrong? How could this happen to me? And they're like they're relating themselves to that victim. I think it creates this bond, which is why I think women just consume true crime at such a high rate. But yeah, we get these spreadsheets and of all of this information that's very useful to know, like products that they buy, all this stuff that are great for the advertising side, and just for us to know like who is our target listener. Not that we're targeting them, but that maybe we should be targeting them even more so because that's who's already listening. We just put it out there and target the podcast listening audience, and then we learn that this is who our core audience is, and it definitely helps us out. Helps us a lot. I think talking to my friends at and partners at iHeart and Cadence, just looking at I'm not sure what you guys are seeing in terms of listenership and drop off, but I think true crime may be seeing a little bit more of a dip. We're seeing about maybe 15% dip in listenership. I think people, number one, there's more content about what's currently, and I guess there are 2 things currently. Previous to the protests, national, international protests over racial injustice, there was COVID for 2-3 months, and I think so much COVID information out there. Podcasts, people tuned into CNN every day, just watching body count rise and people in fear of their life. That darker content, true crime, maybe just wasn't what people were wanting to listen to. I think also a big thing is the commute. No one was commuting anymore. So if you normally listen to podcasts on your drive to and from work, that drive didn't exist anymore. Now you're home with your kids. You don't have 30, 45 minutes to dedicate to a true crime episode. So I think that maybe as much, if not more, is the reason why for the drop off in true crime, but in general in podcasting, and for the most part in longer episodes and serialized content. If you have a new topic every day on a show that's maybe 20 minutes, that's much more digestible for someone whose schedule just got flipped upside down. But if you need to listen to episode 1 through 12, 45 minutes each, that's just not an investment you're probably diving into in this current climate. And then after COVID, obviously, not after COVID, with us now and will continue to be for the foreseeable future. But taking the headline for COVID is what we've been dealing with, for hundreds of years, but what we've been dealing with most recently with Ahmaud Arbery, George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, so many names, and the protests that have been followed around the country. I think that has actually woken people up to want to listen to podcasts that are about this subject matter in the same way that they wanted to listen to the CNN podcast about COVID. And I think that definitely opens the door. I think people's minds are more open to people who were maybe denying this or just eyes weren't open are now seeing that it is happening. It happened at a rate far more frequent than they thought. And if they care enough about this movement, which I believe they do, because if you look at these protests, you see people of all ages, all races, and it's inspiring. So if those people are just now joining the fight, they're probably now more inclined to say, I need to hear and see more about how this has, what I've missed over my life. Those movies, those documentaries, those podcasts that are covering cases that have, have a racial injustice or the systemic racism and how that impacted these cases, the victims or the perpetrator, they are probably more willing to consume that content. Atlanta Monster will be one of those podcasts where if you're just now waking up, which it woke up a lot of people who were like, man, I'm from Atlanta. I've never heard of this before. How could I have never heard of it before? And that reason is pretty glaring, is that, it was something that the country and the state and the city wanted to bury. And it's also, if there is a victim that you can get away with not covering, not solving their crime, it's a victim of color. And that is what happened at Atlanta Child Murders and Atlanta Monster podcast. Same goes for, there have been several podcasts covering Freddie Gray from the names that have made national headlines to the smaller names. So I think if there is a positive that's coming out of this, it's that people are opening their eyes and hopefully will take it further than the social media post, further than even going to a protest, actually educate themselves on what has been happening, and then say, well, why is it happening?
Donald, I think there's an opportunity. I was down in Atlanta to Dragon Con last year and, sat in a couple of panels, had a diversity group talking about media. And, I think what I kind of came to a realization just about a year ago that made me excited about podcasting was that we've got the ability now. No one can be silenced. No, the media can't shut a story off. The media can't change a topic and move to the next headline. Podcasts allow a continuation of the story and to get deep in the guts of what's going on. Again, I've used this. I've told Rob and I've talked about this a dozen times, or at least I have on the show, about a protest that was happening, and the media showed up, and the media went over and talked to some white guy that was not even part of protest, asking him what this was about, what was going on, instead of talking to the protest organizers. And they were so pissed because they were there trying to share a message, and they were just ignored. So the media, in my opinion, doesn't always do any of these stories justice. They don't get in deep. They just cover the top. And so for me, I think the thing I get excited about diversity in podcasting right now is they can't shut us up. They can't stop the story. And they don't, first of all, they don't have the time. They can't allot the sponsor time. They can't, and sponsor issues. A sponsor may come back and say, "Hey, you're doing this too much. I'm ready to drop your show." They can't. There's all kinds of factors that weigh into all this stuff. So I think podcasting is a perfect opportunity for us to have this diversity of a discussion, diversity of views, get people educated. Is there a way we can put a resource together of these voices? Because we got to hunt for it. So maybe your team can lead and say, "Hey, here's a starting list of great topics to listen to, or people to listen to." Is that something we can put together? Or
yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think the podcast community has come together, even if not organized, but I think there are a lot of progressive voices in podcast, and that stretches across all races. And I've seen a lot of people promoting, like, this is what you should listen to or can listen to. This is how you support podcasts made by Black creators, or that are centered around Black stories. That's important. We want to support that. And we've been really talking about, like, what can we do that's impactful? That's not as an industry, that's not just piggybacking on what the music industry may have done with the Blackout Tuesday, or with what organizers on the street are like. How is podcasting? And we know it's unique, right? So we know why it's unique and how it's unique. So how do we use the uniqueness of podcasting and the audio platform to bring awareness? And so we're working on some stuff now and have some ideas, and it's already crossing over into our content, obviously, with Atlanta Child Murders. We're in the middle of finishing up releasing Sworn season 2 this summer, and we're finishing an episode on just dedicated completely to race in the criminal justice system, and partnering with the Georgia Innocence Project, and are profiling some cases and talking to experts and getting that out there. And when that comes out, probably be in August, I believe, when that episode will hit. It'll be perfect timing, and it's not because it was set up that way. It's just that if you're going to cover racial injustice in America, it was going to always be perfect timing. Because if something didn't just happen, something is about.
It's just about to happen. Right? Yeah.
So fortunate, but it's something that we have to deal with. And I think there are so many, great voices in podcasting, from DeRay McKesson and Pod Save People. Sean King is great on with his podcast Breakdown, and being on the front lines on a daily basis. He's one of those people who uses social media and his email list and his platform in podcasting to get the word out to. I mean, the how fast this stuff happens is amazing. When you see a cop abuse someone, and then you see someone like Sean King put that on his social media and talk about it in his podcast, put a picture of that officer up, and in 24 hours later, that officer is identified. The chief of police has had to make a statement about that. Like, social media, social activism, community activism, it all ties together. And because podcast, you can sit down at any time, exactly like you guys are doing, exactly like we're doing, do it live, or publish it, edit it and publish it, and it's out there, and no one can stop it. And it's not about monetization. It's not about scheduling this out so that it's the timing is perfect with your distributor. It's just like, look, we're just going to do this thing because now is the people are counting on us for news, information, direction. So I think we're reaching out to other podcasters. We're figuring out how we can use this medium, and we want to take time to do it. I think, like I said, everyone is doing great things now. My concern is when it all dies down, what are we doing? And I want to have a plan for that time, and so that people never forget that this is a constant struggle, and it won't be over when these officers are now arrested. It's not over. And will they be convicted? History tells us that they won't, at least not all of them, and if they are, not for the amount of time that we think they deserve. So the fight's going to continue. And when the Arbery case is tried, we'll be right back into that. And then when there's still no arrests in the Breonna Taylor case. So there's so many fights that we got to keep fighting. And I think podcasting, like you said, there is no one saying what we can and can't do. So if any medium is going to lead the charge, which one could it possibly be? Can't count on the media to do it.
Yeah.
Said,
Right.
their goal
Right.
to get people to not. I don't think their goal is to divide, but they know that things that are divisive get people to tune in. And
Right.
no matter what organization, I think they all need to be held accountable. Donald Trump says one thing, Fox News usually backs that. CNN will say something different, but they all have the same goal of getting coverage on the thing that are going to get people tuned in and most riled up. So we gotta, Killer Mike had a great was on a press conference with Atlanta Mayor Mayor Bottoms earlier this week, and he said the same thing, that the media has to be held accountable, and that CNN and others have to start giving people hope and telling people what they can and should do, not just how bad it is. I'm tired of seeing breaking news, and then it's not breaking news. It's breaking news. Something happened 12 hours. That's not breaking news. Give us something positive and give us a direction of what we can do, who we should be listening to, that's giving us other perspective, not just the same people coming on telling us the same things and two sides arguing, never connecting with the other people on the other side. And that's what we really need.
Right.
People who are talking from the middle, how we can all come together and affect change that will impact everyone. Systemic racism, if we tackle that, it helps everyone. It doesn't just help the people who are being oppressed by the system. You legalize marijuana or decriminalize marijuana, it currently disproportionately impact people of color in a negative way. But if we legalize or decriminalize, that helps everyone in a positive way. So we have to gain by working together, and there's nothing to lose by working together. So it's a win-win that we have to present that narrative to the mass, to the general public.
Let me ask you a question, and this is a perspective. So, in the recent years, we've seen a huge number of women come into podcasting, and probably the number of women creating podcasts now are growing faster than the number of men creating podcasts, which is a great thing. We see a large number of women of color coming in creating podcasts, but I do see that there is not as many men of color coming in and joining and doing podcast creation. How do we get more men of color into the podcasting space talking about these things? Because I really see, at least on my side, when I'm just looking at customer makeup and again, I'm not even looking at content. So really content, agnostic.
It can be anything.
It could be anything, right?
Yeah.
But we're not seeing as many as men of color coming in and tell stories. Now, I got some good friends who tell some great stories, and we have a great time, and we laugh our asses off, and it's great. Now, why can't we get those guys in and telling those fun stories, but at the same time getting down in the weeds? Do you think there's a reason why the men are missing?
I don't know, and honestly, I haven't seen it that way. And it could be the level of success of that podcast, right? Like there could be 100 podcasts, more than 100. There's so many out there.
Right.
How many thousands of podcasts out there that are led by Black men just haven't broke through? I think that's the bigger question. I have plenty of friends, and I have plenty of Black men that come up to me at Podcast Movement that say, "Hey, I'm doing a podcast about Black fathers. I'm doing a podcast about, the interview podcast about music or culture." So I have those friends that I get, and those people reach out to me. So I know they're out there. Have they broken through as much as maybe the Black female-led podcast? Maybe not. I think DeRay is one who definitely broke through. Obviously, Sean King. You have Angela Rye with a podcast. A lot of Black female creators. The Nod is Black male and Black female. I don't know that I could say anything negative of why it's happening. I can only say something positive of why Black females are probably excelling. I think they're just Black women are exceptional as a whole, and are I believe I just read something that said Black women are the most educated group in America, and they are excelling in a way that no other group is. And I think they're also entrepreneurs. They are, especially in Atlanta, what I see is a bunch of Black owned businesses, and a lot of Black businesses owned by Black women, whether they be restaurants, hair salons, attorneys. My business manager is a Black woman who owns her own company, and her staff is completely full of Black women. So I think they're just excelling in life in general, and that just makes them excel in the podcast platform as well. And I think we need to, and I'm not saying that they're excelling in a way that they have kind of overcome what what systemic racism has done to the Black community, but I think they are just breaking through faster. But I also see them reaching back and bringing up other Black creators as well. In just work on the TV side, on the film side, and now in podcasting. And I see a lot of Black female and Black male creators that are coming into podcasting from TV and film, which I think is great as well. So, and I'm working with some of those people, and will be over the next couple of years. So that's pretty exciting. But yeah, I think
it's good you see that.
Positive spin on it. But yeah, you have to look a little bit deeper as well.
It's good that you see that, because it just, on the surface, to me, it looked like that segment was listening. I don't know, maybe I'm completely wrong, but this was the apparent thing. Rob, you were going to say something.
Yeah, I was just, it's, I think, drawing a distinction of women of color and white women, I think, is not really the core discussion. I think women just in general are very, very talented communicators, and I think they are a natural fit to the podcasting space. It doesn't matter what their cultural background is. That's just their orientation. That's why we're seeing such fast growth in women in podcasting, is because it's such a natural fit for who they are and how they communicate, and making personal connections, which is what this medium is all about. I think looking at the big picture of this whole discussion that we've had with Donald is what he's been able to successfully do is connect with people at an emotional level, whether it be positive or negative. And that's what this medium excels at, right? Is creating those connections and creating discussions and creating people thinking. And I think what we're just talking about trying to, and Donald, I'm curious about your thoughts on, as you look at the climate today around crime and police action and race relations, is there an opportunity here for the podcasting space to really kind of support what's happening in a broader sense? And I know we've been talking about that here a little bit, and it's really exciting that there's a lot of thought on that right now. But it seems like that there's so many people paying attention right now, and can that be tapped into for positive change and positive good?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the best thing you can do now is make your voice heard, and that's difficult. It's less difficult for Black Americans, because we're speaking to our own community is behind us, right? But if you're someone who isn't political, if you're someone who has a less diverse friend group or family, obviously there's more at stake. But that's when it's most important. So I think, as an individual, I think just speaking up and supporting is the first step. As someone with a platform, podcast, I don't care if your podcast, what it's about. If you feel like, look, this is a cause I want to support, I don't think it's ever a wrong time to support something as important as human life and human decency and just. So I think you see a lot of people, no matter if crime is their profession or not, speaking up and either doing it with their voice on social media or in their medium of choice. If that's podcasting, then great. And I think within podcasting, there's like you said, we said earlier, there really isn't anyone who can stop anyone from telling a story, but there are levels where how fast, if that story can heard by millions, right? So I think it's about, how do we as a podcast reach out and implore the podcast distributors and hosts to tell Black stories, to have Black people in the room when creation of these stories are happening, when these stories are being marketed, when we're deciding what we're going to feature on our platform. And I've seen some great lists and features of Black creators, Black content, stuff that's socially aware. So I think that's being done, but I think it has to be done not just when the country's being torn apart, not just on not during Black History. So it's one of those things where us, even as the Podcast Academy, I think that's one thing that we can take on is like how do we make sure there are more Black voices? I mean, me being part of the Academy is, I think, obviously one of the reasons that I wanted to be part, and because I'm really not an insider guy. Like, I've been an entrepreneur my whole life, never worked for a corporate company or been part of a corporate structure. I've always run businesses from home, and whether I was selling T-shirts, managing talent, or whatever it was, I'm an entrepreneur. But being part of something that is a body and organizing body for industry, I think that's important. And one of the first things that I said when we were looking for governors was, I think we need representation from a Black female as a governor as well, and that was received well by everyone involved. So I think it's about having voices in the room. And one thing I notice when I'm in rooms, whether I'm making podcasts, in rooms, closing deals, pitching a podcast to a network, I'm usually the only Black face in the room, which means I'm the only Black voice in the room, usually. I mean, there are some people who may not be a person of color who will still speak up, have an opinion or a supportive agenda for people of color. But it's, I always think to myself, if I wasn't here, this room would be very white. It's already very white with me in here because I'm the only one. And there's usually less females than males, and one Black person, and that Black person is usually me. So, and these are things that no one else sees. We see the content, we see these logos of all these companies, whether Apple, Spotify, iHeart, Intercom, Cadence 13. We see the logos, but we need to see the makeup of the company. We need to see who are the people in these rooms. Who are doling out these deals to these podcasts. Saying, let's take this out of your base. Let's give you your production. Let's amplify your market, amplify your voice. If there's one thing that we can do as a body and as a network, is amplify other podcasts, other creators that are telling important stories, that are diversifying the content, but also diversifying the listening. If we can elevate Black voices in podcasts, then we're expanding the reach of podcasts to the Black community. Once they're under the tent, they need more content to consume. That benefits everyone. And that's always our goal. The biggest compliment you can ever give me as a listener is that my podcast is the first podcast you ever listen to, because we just brought someone in, and that helps everyone. So we need to go find the people who aren't listening and tell their stories. And currently, I think we can do a hell of a lot better in reaching out to the Black community with stories. And that's on me as well. I'm part of this industry, and that burden falls on me even more so than on anyone else, because as a Black person, the burden on us there's always a burden on us to take care of, bring up other Black people with us. So, I take this very personally, and I hope that the industry sees it the same way and can, implement some change in front of the mic, behind the mic, in the boardroom, all those places.
Donald, I don't know if you're familiar. We've been working with Ebony.com and Ebony Jet Media for the past couple of months. They're building a podcast network of diverse voices and content. And if a podcaster wants to join their network, we've got I'm going to put this up on the screen here. Let's see if I can find the right button.
Yeah. And we've also been working with them too.
Yeah. So you can submit your podcast over there. It's ebonyjetmedia.com/submit-podcast. Just another place for distribution of content. And it's a great team over there. So I don't know if you guys are familiar with what they're doing, but they've always been a great voice.
Yeah. No, I actually just had a conversation with someone about a podcast that was being pitched to Ebony. So it was a great idea, great concept that I'm hoping to get involved with. I mean, we try. The thing is, like, we're such a small company, and we're growing very fast, and it just never feels like we're growing fast enough, because the things that I want to do and the things that I can do are very different. And you can also can't rush something that you want to be great. And I've missed out on a few stories that I really wanted to tell because they were important Black stories. We're developing some right now. They're coming out as early as January. We are working with some amazing Black creators. We had Tony Harris as the host and voice of Monster DC Sniper, and so there's so much that I want to do, and the way we've grown and expanded was through partners. So I'm looking for partners who have the same vision that I have, so that what might take me 12 months to do it on my own would take me 6 months to do it with a partner who sees the same vision. So we definitely have an agenda and a platform that we probably will make public, to be honest, because one thing that I know is that this is no time to be silent. So if you're working on something very quietly, people need to know that now, because they need to know that they have our support, and that we have already been committed to telling Black stories and exposing the criminal justice system in a way that is very specific in terms of race. So this has made us accelerate kind of some of the things that we had already been working on, but also just accelerate how we're going to market, talk about things. So it'll be very interesting to see kind of the shift in content and the shift in listenership based on everything that's going on in the world right now.
Right. Rob, we're already an hour 45. Did you have any last questions for Donald before we wrap up today?
No, I think we should probably wrap it up, Todd. It's been a great discussion, and Donald, it's been fantastic to have you on the show, and also it's great to have you on the board of the Podcast Academy too. So I really look forward to working a lot closer with you and seeing what we can do with this organization to really have a significant impact on the podcasting medium in a positive way. So yeah.
And if you're a podcaster and you haven't gotten something out of this episode, you need to go back and listen again.
Well, thank you guys for having me. I appreciate it. To working with you, Rob, and making fulfilling what everyone wants the Academy to, right? Like, and that goes from everyone, original podcasters to people who are just listeners and are interested in getting into to the industry. So yeah, there's a lot of work to be done on so many fronts, but I'm game. I'm ready to continue that work, and we're looking for allies to jump into this fight with this today. So I appreciate you guys.
So folks, go over to tenderfoot.tv. Donald, is there a good way for them to contact you? Is there which way do you prefer?
Website you can reach us through. I'm on social media at thealbright03, Twitter, Instagram, not on Facebook, but you can find me that way. And I'm a pretty open book. Have a question, have a pitch. I mean, it's all about personal connection and communication. So reach out to me, and odds are I'll get back to you.
Oh, I got a couple stories for you. You probably get more than you can handle, but if anyone out there is thinking about this true crime genre, there's a lot of I think you can many things to consider, and I hope that we've covered some of those today. But Donald, thanks for being on. We definitely appreciate it. This was fantastic. Again, you can reach Donald at tenderfoot.tv, or it was DJ Albright03 on Twitter. Did I get it right?
D Albright.
D Albright.
Yep, RIGHT 03. That's on Twitter or Instagram, D Albright 03.
Awesome. Of course, I'm Todd at blueberry.com or at Geek News on Twitter. Rob?
I'm on Twitter as well, at Rob Greenlee, and you can send me an email, robg@libsyn.com. I'm happy to hear from you and start a dialogue about podcasting. So thank you so much, Donald, for taking so much time out today to join us.
And as we
appreciate it, man. Definitely.
And as we leave you today, I'll put the screen up. You guys can see that. For those of you watching, make sure you go over to the website, check their shows out, get subscribed, get enthralled. But from us here at New Media Show, we'll see you on Wednesday at 3 p.m. Eastern. We'll be back with an episode of the show. Everyone, thanks. Take care. takes a few minutes for us to stream to get off, but we're still live. So
I appreciate it. This was didn't seem like an hour and 45. I guess I'm pretty good at running my mouth.
yeah, it went fast. It was great.
You must be a podcaster.
I know, right? I need to jump in front of the mic and run my mouth on my own podcast. See how that goes.
Yeah, you should do it sometime. Yeah,
Well, you'd be great.
definitely. Yeah, I think so too.
You guys have been going for how long?
Well, this is
So over 10 years, I believe. Yeah.
10 years for this show and 16 total for me. Same for Rob. We've been in the space for since 04. So
Wow.
yeah, for a while. Okay, we are officially shut YouTube off.
Yeah, I started on the radio back in 1999, but then